All right. Welcome, everybody. We're going to get started with today's Lunch and Learn. My name is Jo Williams, and I am the 4-H educator in Scioto County, Ohio. And today we're going to talk about effective 4-H club communications. The state of Ohio has now given us the task of making sure that our volunteers every year receive training in some different competencies to try and help make sure that you guys as volunteers are getting the tools you need to be successful in your clubs. And so these lunch and learn sessions that we have designed try and cover a few of those competencies. And so they're kind of a quick little bite-sized information lunch and learn that you can join us for here at lunchtime on Wednesdays. And so this one, we're going to do effective club communications. And if you guys are able to, here in a few minutes, I will have some time for us to interact and hear from you guys. So if you're able to unmute yourselves when we get to that point, I would appreciate hearing from you. But with that, we're going to get started. Communication leads to community. That is an understanding and intimacy and mutual valuing. And I think this quote kind of leads to the heart of why we need to have effective communication, is because 4-H itself and your clubs are a community of their own. And so that communication within your club and within our program overall is what leads us to have understanding and shared values and a successful community. And so that's why we want to make sure that we have strong communication within our clubs as well as within our county 4-H programs. And if at any time throughout this, if you have questions, feel free to type them into the chat box, or at the end, I'll take questions. You guys can unmute and ask questions as well. Effective communication. What do you guys think of when I say communication? So as you are thinking about that question, if you are able, I would like for you to type into the chat box what you think of when I say communication. Don't hit send yet, just type it in, and we're going to kind of do a chat explosion. I don't know how explosive it'll be. There's not like 500 of us on this call, but if you type into the chat box what you think of when I say communication, and then when I say go, if you hit the send button, we'll see what everybody's answers are. So, and it can be anything, whatever pops into your head when I say communication as it relates to the 4-H program. So everybody go ahead and type what you think into your chat box, and we'll do a little countdown of 3, 2, 1, hit send. And let's see what your responses say. So, engagement, getting information out, talking and keeping in contact, the exchanging of information and ideas among people. Those are all excellent, excellent answers. If I click on the chat box, then I can't advance my slides, sorry. So communication is the sending and receiving of information. It is really important within our 4-H program and within your club that we have strong communication with our 4-H families and with between our 4-H volunteers and the extension staff. And I think when we talk about communication, a lot of times we think about speaking or writing, but I think sometimes the one thing that gets lost is the listening part of communication. And that's vital to the communication process. That is the receiving part of this definition of communication. So making sure that we're sending information, but also that we are receiving information is important when we're thinking about how we communicate with our clubs and our 4-H families. As we are talking about communication, we have 10 tips for better communication. And we're going to go through these. And then in a minute, I'm going to actually ask you guys to share some ideas with us as well. But first of all, we're going to go through these tips for better communication within your club. And I think the first thing that is really important for our volunteers to know is to get to know your families. Every year, you may have new families joining. You may not know the parents or the children that well. So getting to know those families is really important in having a successful club. That may mean at the beginning of the year, you have a parent or family meeting, just so those, or maybe it's a new family meeting, or some way for you to get to know those families and whoever happens to be bringing those kids to meetings. A lot of times once our clubs get going, during those 4-H meetings, either parents may drop kids off or the parents may be sitting in the back of the room somewhere, kind of having their own little side conversations or chit-chatting. But getting to know them and giving some expectations at a family meeting or a kickoff type of meeting at the beginning of the year, letting the parents know what expectations are is going to also help your 4-H members be more successful. The next tip is to make sure you have clear lines of communication. So you want to make sure that that communication is happening, that you're sending and receiving information from your families and your 4-H members, that it's not all you sending information, you communicating things out. But if you don't know that they're hearing you or seeing what you're saying to them or listening to what you're saying, then it's not working. So you want to make sure those lines of communication are open. Finding out what works best for your club members. We go through this all the time as 4-H educators, trying to find what works best for our 4-H volunteers. And, it varies. Some people email works best. Some people texting works best. Some people social media is best. There are all different ways we can communicate with people, finding what works best for your club, and then letting people know what that form of communication is going to be, how they can expect to hear from you is important when you're trying to make sure that people are getting information. I know in our county, as far as with our volunteers, because I know that different people use different types of communication, we try and hit several different ways of communicating when we're trying to communicate with our volunteers and our 4-H families. And I'll go through some of those here in a bit. We want you to make sure that you're providing families with information at the beginning of the year. So maybe that's a club calendar or a schedule for the year. So families can plan ahead. It's really hard when people don't get information until the last minute. Of course, there can be last minute changes when you're doing things come up, meetings may need to get rescheduled or canceled, due to a certain issue or whatever. But to make sure that you are providing your families with a set calendar that they can anticipate when club meetings are going to be. Maybe you meet the third Sunday of the month at a certain place, or maybe, you meet the second Thursday evening of the month and you move from house to house. If they know what to expect and you go over that with them at the beginning of the year, then communicating that ahead of time and setting up dates as far in advance as possible is going to be beneficial to your families. As a 4-H educator who has kids, my life's busy too. When my kids were younger, when they first joined 4-H, the club they were in, I loved the fact that the volunteer of that club, she had a calendar basically set for the whole year, and they may add more dates to it as the year progressed, but it usually had 13 or 14 dates on it. And I would sit there and I would look at my schedule, because I know I go to camp. I go to 4-H camp for 3 weeks during the month of June. So I would look at the schedule and know, okay, I'm not going to be able to get them to the meeting on this date. So I'm going to have to find a ride for them, or make sure my husband's off work, or know that they're not going to be be able to go to that meeting. So we've got to plan ahead for what meetings they can make it to. So that's one of the ways we can make our members and their families, having a successful experience, is to give them information in plenty of time so they can make choices. I mentioned earlier that communication is the sending and receiving. So listening. Listen to your club members, listen to their families, listen to your other volunteers, listen to what people's needs are. If there's something that's not working and we're listening, we'll see that and we can then adapt and try a better way to do things. And that goes for anything, not just communicating. That listening and seeing how things are going and then reevaluating is always, that's just a good way to do the business of our 4-H clubs. Sending out reminders, if you find what works best to communicate with your club members, and then send reminders. There may be different formats that you use to communicate with your families. And so finding out what that is, and then even though you've got those meetings set in advance, it never hurts to send a reminder out. That way, in the busyness of life that we all know happens, then that way that people remember that they do have a meeting coming up. Here's one of my best tips for better communication, especially when you're talking about new families and new members. You need to remember to explain things. 4-H has a lot of jargon and lingo, and we have lots of policies and expectations. When you have brand new families, they may not know when you say a child needs to attend QA. What is QA? What does that mean? Why do they need to attend it? So we want to make sure as volunteers that don't assume that everybody in the room knows what you're talking about. When you're working with your club officers as they are conducting the meetings, remind them to define things, to explain things. And if people have questions, you may need to walk them through explanations of that jargon and that lingo. Sometimes, when we've been doing something for so long, it's just second nature to us and it sounds very natural. But there are lots of terms and things that we use in the 4-H world that if someone is brand new, they won't know what we're talking about. And we want people to have a good experience and feel like they're part of the 4-H community, and making sure that they understand and don't feel like they're being left out because they don't understand what's going on. I think that's very important. We always want you as a volunteer to be honest and straightforward with your members. That's what they have an expectation of, you being the honest, straightforward adult who is going to be helping them. So we always encourage all of our volunteers to be honest and straightforward with youth and their families as they're working through their projects and their 4-H year. Encourage your members to communicate. You want to encourage them to ask questions. Make sure that they're listening, and you listen to them as they're asking questions. If they're asking a lot of questions about a specific topic, then maybe that's something that you see that your club could, at the next meeting, go into a little bit more detail about, to help those kids and their families better understand a specific topic. So always remember that the other side of the communication is listening. So listening to what they're saying, listening to their questions. And then my final tip here is to reach out personally and ask your 4-H members to either help with tasks or for information about what they're doing. When you actually make an ask of a 4-H member, maybe you see that a 4-H member has done a great job on a project, and you ask them to share something about what they've learned, or you ask them to assist you with a task during a club meeting. That's meaningful. That helps develop those relationships with those kids. That lets them know that they're seen and that you appreciate them being there. So when you make requests of them and encourage them as you're doing them, and then also give them a pat on the back and tell them they did a great job after they've completed something that you asked them. That's the way that you guys are developing those positive relationships with your 4-H members. I've kind of got a little chart here on the screen if you guys can see it. And I know obviously we're on Zoom, so you cannot actually fill these in here. But what I was hoping is that we could actually have you guys unmute and give us some ideas about how you communicate with your clubs. So my little chart, if you can see it on the screen, says, how do you communicate? So what are some ideas that you use, or ways that you communicate with your club members and their families? And if anybody wants to unmute and tell us how you communicate, or if you're not able to unmute, you can type it in the chat box. But how are some ways that you all communicate with your 4-H members?
A private Facebook club group.
You all have a private Facebook club group? Okay, that's good.
We also, in addition to that, we also have a remind group.
Okay.
Text.
Yep.
Before each one of our meetings, we will put together a small flyer that we can send through like text message or Facebook. And we will use like a picture of one of the kids or one of the horses and kind of hide it in another picture.
Mm-hmm.
So they all get fun in taking and looking for the hidden object inside the picture. Plus, it's also a little notification of, hey, our next meeting's coming up.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Actually, you know, makes them look at it, makes them want to look at it.
Also printed agendas at the meetings so that they have something to follow along with, and notes kind of already written out.
Yes.
So on the agenda, a couple years ago, I started putting, well, maybe a few years ago now, I started putting on all upcoming dates, and then, delete them out as we go past them. But every family member, I do provide every family member, or every family, not family member, but every family, a copy of that agenda at each meeting. And those also contain all of the scheduled meetings that we have up until we start riding, because we are a horse club. But
Okay, that's a great idea, Kim. Thanks.
I think it's helped some, but
well, and I think that's what we talk about. You know, we send a copy of our county, we send a copy of our calendar out to every family, and it's on our website. But we also know that not everybody is looking at it. So that's where we're relying on you all as volunteers. You guys are the go-between, between us at the extension office and with our club members. And having email and our online database has helped us be able to disseminate information to our families. However, in our 4-H online system, we can actually see who has opened emails, when they opened them, when they've read them. And we know not everybody's opening and reading those. So we really are still relying on you all as volunteers to make sure that kids and their families are getting the information that they need from us. We can't, in Scioto County, we have, 1,000 4-H members, and there's no way that we can physically speak the words or hand that piece of paper to every single kid. So making sure that you guys as volunteers are the boots on the ground, making sure our families know the information and know those dates and upcoming events, that's important. That's what we're relying on you to do with the kids. Anybody else have any ways they communicate? Somebody said they use the Band app in the chat box. I have not used the Band app. I have heard people use it. I need to check into that and see how that works. I do use Remind for our teen leaders, junior fair board, camp counselors. I know some other folks I've heard of use GroupMe to communicate with people. I've had, when I've done this training before, we've had people say they just basically have, like a group text message that they may send out to folks. Virginia mentioned the club has like a club Facebook page. I think what's important is to make sure that whatever it is you're using works for everyone. So I know one year, and this has been many years ago, when social media was kind of first starting, we had a club that was using Facebook for all of their send all their notices and everything out. But there were a couple of families in the club that did not have Facebook. And so there was a disconnect there because they weren't getting the information. And so I had to remind the volunteers in that club, I'm like, it's fine that you use Facebook, but you also then need to remember these people don't have social media. So you need to make sure that you're contacting them some other way. Because if they don't use whatever avenue you are using, you're going to need to make sure they're getting their information some other way. Did anybody else have any other suggestions for ways you communicate? I didn't hear anybody say they mailed letters. I think we've all gotten away from that. All right.
No, our group still mails out quite a few, but it's more in the form of thank you letters.
Yes, and we do encourage that. And even 5 years ago, my office mailed a lot more stuff. We still didn't like mail tons of like through the postal service. We didn't mail a lot of our newsletters and stuff, but we would still mail things to like our organizational advisors, and we do still occasionally, depending on what it is. But for the most part, most of our stuff does get sent through email, just because with our 4-H online database, it's easy for us to send out a broadcast message to everybody. And that way, we know people are getting it. Well, we hope they're getting it. We know they're getting it. We're not sure if they are reading it, but we know they're getting it. So, well, we just talked through this. Are there any ideas that were things you hadn't heard of before? Anybody learn a new thing? I need to try the band app, so that's new for me. I've heard of it before, but I have never looked into it.
Yeah, I've never heard of the band app.
How does it work? Anybody able to unmute and tell us about it? No, we'll have to look that up after that'll be what I do is when I get off of here. I know on group. Go ahead.
We also, this is Rachel. We use it with our teen leaders too. It is similar to Remind in that, you can send one post to all members who are subscribed to it. So you set up a group, you can send out an invite link. But the cool feature about it is then it kind of runs like Facebook or any of those other things where they can send an emoji that, like to it that they got it. They can add a comment, those kind of things. It also has a calendar tab, so you can put all of your dates on there.
Yeah.
And you can set up polls and those types of things. So when I'm trying to find out, okay, who of my teens want to go to Beef Expo, I can put a poll that has an expiration date, on it that tells me who wants to go, who's ready to go, what division they want to be in, all those types of things. So I can gather that information pretty quickly in one spot. There's been a little bit of challenge to it, to making sure that like the teens all have their alerts on so that their messages aren't missed, similar to any app or way of notification. But it's been pretty good because we were getting to the place that I had too many kids that we used to do like a chat, just a text message, and
Mhm.
not all of our kids had iPhones. And so after 20, you couldn't add anyone else to the
Yes.
group. And so then you were limited that way. But this has just allowed for a little more extra interaction and things.
I may have to check that out for my groups this year, because we've been using Remind, and I think the thing that is hard is if they don't have the notifications turned on, then they miss them. And with Remind, you're limited on characters. Are you limited on characters in band?
No, not at all.
That would be nice.
It is. It kind of
I-
has that Facebook look to it, when you're scrolling through to see
Yeah.
all the different latest posts and things, and
Okay,
mine are very large. I almost use it
good,
like a little newsletter kind of thing. So, yep.
awesome,
You can also save pictures and upload pictures. So different events and things, you
cool,
can take pictures of what's going on and then they can share it all there.
awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rachel.
Yep.
I learned something new today too. All right, so as we continue to talk about communication, then we've been talking about communicating within your clubs with your members, but then there is also, for your club, you also need to communicate with us at the extension office. So what we need from you as volunteers is we need to know that you are checking and reading your email, and make sure that the email you have listed for your family profile in 4-H Online is correct. And that's the email that you're checking. Because when we send things out, that's where, it goes to the 4-H, it goes to the email you have put in 4-H Online. So every year as you're re-enrolling and as families are re-enrolling, remind them to make sure that the email they're using is actually the email they check. Because it doesn't do us any good to send information to an email that is one that they're not utilizing. We ask that you check your county website. Most of our counties post forms, they post calendars, they post blogs or newsletters, they post things to their website. And so that information gets updated on their websites. So please periodically check the website for information. We also ask that you encourage or help your clubs and families read rules and policies. Make sure they understand where to find rules and policies. Most of the time, those are located on our websites. And so as everybody enrolls, they sign off on their little code of conduct. And in that code of conduct, it says, I understand the rules and policies of Ohio 4-H and the projects and blah, blah, blah. And everybody checks off on that to enroll. But, sometimes it's easy to check off on that box and not actually go back and read and understand the rules. So we ask that you do make sure your club members know where to find rules and policies related to their project and have them go over those. We want to make sure, again, I mentioned earlier that you are the ones that are the between our office and the club members. So we do want to make sure that you are sharing information with your members as you're working with your officer team on your agendas. If there are things that they need to do or events they need to know about, as Kim mentioned earlier, making sure that they know about those things that are coming up is important. Follow your local extension office or 4-H program on social media. I think most of our counties have social media accounts. I know most have Facebook accounts. Some also have Instagram. So find out what social media your county has and then follow it. Social media is an easy way I know I use it a lot because the state 4-H office may make a post about an upcoming statewide event. And so it's very easy for me to just share from the Ohio 4-H page to the Scioto County 4-H Facebook page about the statewide sewing clinic that will be coming up here in several weeks. So be sure that you do follow your county on social media if you have social media and they have social media. And then one thing that I always remind our folks of is to be sure you ask questions. A lot of times when folks do ask a question, they apologize. They'll call and they'll say, I'm really sorry to bug you, and don't be sorry. That's why we're here. It is our job to help you. The world of 4-H has a ton of information, and the information that you are getting, the information that we get changes a lot. And so we don't expect you to know every single detail about all 220 plus projects. I don't know all those details. So please don't be afraid to ask questions. If there's anything that you are unsure of, contact your extension office and your 4-H professionals, and be sure to get clarification and ask questions. That's why we're here, is to help you make this 4-H experience the best it can be for you and for your 4-H members. Does anybody have any questions? If not, if you have not put your name in your county in the chat box, if you could please do that, so we can give you credit for being here. If you get your name and county, that would be great. Oh, here we go. So if you are able, we have a link for an evaluation for our Lunch and Learn series. It's a quick, just a little quiz. If you would like to fill that out, that'd be great. We're also adding this in. It's not like it's a hard quiz. It's just, a what did you learn type of quiz. If you could go in and do that for us, there is a QR code on the screen. I know you can't really do a QR code if you're on your phone, but if you're on a laptop, you can hold your phone up and scan that, or you can use the Go link, which is go.osu.edu/4H Lunch and Learn quiz. So if you guys would not mind doing that, we would appreciate it. And otherwise, does anybody have any questions? Let's go up here into the chat. I think we've got names. I think we've hopefully got everybody in here. I do appreciate you all joining us today. We're glad that you were able to pop in, and we do have still, this was our third, so we still have 2 more Lunch and Learns next week. What is next week, Rachel? I believe you're doing next week, aren't you? I think.
Yes, I believe so.
What's your topic?
Creating a positive club culture.
Okay, so next week we'll be creating a positive club culture, and then the week after that, our colleague Joy Bauman is going to be doing a presentation on making posters that pop. Joy used to be a 4-H volunteer, and she actually taught that lesson prior to coming to work for Extension. She did the presentation to a bunch of our 4-H members during COVID. And so we thought it would be a great lesson to offer to our volunteers, so you guys can help the kids in your clubs when it comes time for their projects. So we hope that you can join us the next 2 Wednesdays at noon. And we, with that, we'll log off. Thanks, everybody.